The Troutbeck Symposium grew out of a collaboration between HVRHS alumni, filmmaker, and educator Ben Willis and Salisbury Boys School teacher Ronan McCrisky. The two had been collaborating to create documentary projects with students, which uncovered unknown or undertold stories of Black and Indigenous history in our region.
We're telling it in a way that's centering Black people in the experience. U.S. history has not been written that way. It just hasn't.
The connection to the Troutbeck began when students were researching the Caesar family, one of the oldest known free Black families from Salisbury. The students were able to link up with Catherine Overton, a descendant of the Caesar family. Catherine began telling the students stories of her family's connections to the area.
The newspaper articles that I found online, especially in the Lakeville Journal, talk about their school life. It's like reading Facebook, only I'm going back in time and I'm finding more information about them.
And this is where the connection to Troutbeck came in. During one of the students' discussions with Catherine, it turned out that her uncle had been a driver for the Troutbeck. And one of the stories she loved telling was about how he would go regularly to the Wassaic train station to pick up Langston Hughes. There was a lot more to the Troutbeck than we realized.
As their students dug deeper, they discovered that in 1916 and 1932, two seminal conferences of civil rights leaders were held at the Troutbeck in Amenia, New York. Guests included prominent members of the NAACP at the time, such as W.E.B. Du Bois and James Weldon Johnson. Upon hearing about the students' research, the Troutbeck offered to host an event the following year, showcasing student work exploring BIPOC history. Ben and Ronan were quick to invite teachers from around the regions to participate, including Peter Vermillier at Housatonic Valley Regional High School.
That was a big moment for us, not only because Peter was my former history teacher when I was at Hoosie, but also because he's such a well-regarded educator. We knew if we could convince Peter that this project was worth doing, then we really had something.
After visiting the site of these historic meetings of early civil rights leaders, Peter enthusiastically came on board.
We started last August. I want the students to tell the story that they want to tell. And the students identified 7 areas of history here at Troutbeck. They looked at the role that the geography of this location plays in its history and in our local history. Or they create a timeline to try to put the events of the civil rights movement into a broader history of Troutbeck as a meeting place and a place for conversation.
The Hoosie students took on a wide range of topics, with the goal of creating informational posters which would eventually be permanently displayed at Troutbeck.
We had some groups who looked specifically at the civil rights movement here at Troutbeck and the Spingarns' vital role in it, whether it be in Joel and Amy Spingarn's personal background or the conferences of the NAACP that they hosted, these seminal conferences that really set the stage for the civil rights movement of the 40s to the 60s.
I think that learning about this project in the way that we did allows us to be more independent. It allows us to expand with how much we can find for ourselves. So I think it could also be translated into other areas of our life.
I think it's definitely more interesting and a lot more rewarding every time we find something, because for most topics, people have studied them and have already written papers on them, so you end up just kind of regurgitating information that other people have already discovered, whereas with this, it feels to us like we're figuring it out for the first time, and I think that makes it a lot more captivating and makes you actually want to succeed.
We're working on writers at Troutbeck, and it's really interesting to see that writers came to this small neck of the woods, that they even knew that this place existed, because it feels like a really just small area to us.
Our project is about writers at Troutbeck, and so we originally had a list of 12 authors and writers, and then we narrowed it down to 9, and they all have a major impact on Troutbeck, or they had their publications published at Troutbeck, so they all have a connection to the original location. I think we all hope that people realize how many influential writers visited Troutbeck and had a connection, and that there's a lot of diverse people who are connected to Troutbeck, and usually it's just about Emerson and Thoreau, but there's Ida B. Wells and Langston Hughes that are all really connected as well.
So it's really interesting to see that such influential people actually came here and produced some of their works.
My project is researching the mahogany sculptures at the end of some of the beams at one of the buildings on the estate. And what we've learned so far is that they were put up to represent the 4 American races as understood by Joel Spingarn. And we believe they were put up in the 1930s. And one of the big mysteries has been the 4th one, which at some point was taken down. And so we've had to do some deep digging to try to figure out what has happened there.
Our project specifically made it so that we had to reach out to a lot of people, and we had to be willing to accept that we weren't going to completely succeed at our goal. Because of this, we ended up putting a Google form on our final project asking for visitors at Troutbeck to respond to what we had found and to let us know if they had any more information. But in terms of research, it meant that we had to look at a much smaller scale and really delve into every possible lead.
We are making an exhibit that will be hung at the site of Troutbeck, an informational poster like you see on the side of national landmarks or if you're hiking. It's going to be describing the Spingarn medals and as they relate to the NAACP.
We looked on the NAACP website actually to see who had won the award in previous years. And I guess it was just surprising to see how many people have won the award for so many different reasons.
Our goal all along was to function as public historians. Tell that story in a way that's accessible to the public. They're not writing here for academics or they're not writing here for their teacher, they're writing for the public. What we have done at Housatonic with our Project 29 website or through this work with the Troutbeck Symposium is to let the students steer the ship. They choose the topics, they do the research, they identify what they believe is important, and ultimately they tell the story that they want to tell.
It was very interesting to get to learn about our area and to uncover a piece of history that I didn't know much about.
We get to kind of like do some detective work.
I like this way of learning because we're able to kind of like be our own teachers in a way.
We're at Troutbeck right now where our project is being presented.
It's definitely rewarding to kind of come to the end of our project, so that does not at all mean that this journey is over.
Their posters were amazing. They really impressed everyone. I couldn't believe how many people were coming up to me and just commenting on the Whoosy posters and the quality of the work that they had done. They were fascinating, they were professionally made. It was really incredible to see what they brought.
Currently at the site of Troutbeck in Armenia, New York, and it's a truly beautiful site, and there's a lot of history to be held here.
I mean, it's amazing because we've been researching about this place for basically 2 whole semesters, and just seeing what we've been looking at like online is just crazy to see in real life at such like a local place that we can learn about.
Then the presentations began, and Whoosy was up first. Because they had so many projects, one student, Linus Barnes, was selected to make a statement on behalf of all the Whoosy groups.
Good morning.
Boy, he knocked it out of the park.
Our class's jumping off point for this exploration came from the incomplete and outdated historical marker placed by the New York State Education Department. The sign, which stands only a few hundred feet from here, was erected in 1935 when New York State did not realize how fundamentally important what was going on here would eventually become. We chose as our task to reimagine what such historical markers would have to say about Troutbeck's story if they were created today. After our initial meeting, we as a class felt the need to make the hidden history of Troutbeck accessible to all who visit. As we have learned, once you shift your focus even a little bit, your entire perception of the past is changed. The Troutbeck of Myron Benton is important and beautiful, but looking closely at the Troutbeck of Amy and Joel Spingarn gives us a richer understanding of its wider importance. The historian Ty Sedgley has written, "History is dangerous because it goes after our myths and our identity." But he argues that only by acknowledging and understanding our history can we get past this. It is our class's hope that our work might be one small step towards accomplishing this. Thank you so much for your attention. We really hope you enjoy the new plaques.
The stakes are very high. That's what all of these, that the students are doing, the research that they're doing, what they're uncovering, they're providing us with a blueprint for moving forward into the future. We got to support that. And not quietly either. We have to support that loudly. This kind of work. This is enduring. This stays with the students. This should stay with us. This should stay with the teachers. This is what you build on. And this is how we get better as a society. Well, thank you very much.